Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. 𝐒𝐚𝐧𝐝 here. If you're new here, I talk movies, series, gaming, music, basically everything entertainment. If you're into any of that stuff, I'd strongly recommend that you subscribe, hit the bell icon so that you can get that content first. Yeah, do all that good stuff. And on days like today, I like to throw a little positivity back into the world. And if that can even help one person have a better day, have a different approach to the week, then my job here is basically done. All right? Okay, let's get into it. This past week, I binge-watched The Queen's Gambit, and I was inspired to make a video about chess. So, good show, actually. If you haven't seen that, you should probably check it out. It's a very, very good show. So, chess. I was introduced to chess when I was probably 7 or 8 years old. My dad walks in with his magnetic chessboard, and I was probably more impressed with the magnetic board than the actual game itself. And he lays the pieces on the board and slowly starts to explain to me what each of the pieces on the board does. And as he explained, I got more and more fascinated with the game because it was interesting. From the rook to the knight to the bishop to the king to the queen. That life in those 64 squares became fascinating to me. And as I played more and more, I started to discover little things. And now that I'm older and understand the game a little more, I haven't played in a very, very long time, but I have a better understanding of the game than I did all those years back. And here's the simple thing that I've discovered. The most prized piece on the board is the queen. It can do what all the other pieces combined can do, with the exception, of course, of the knight. The knight can move 2 steps forward and the step left or right, forming an L shape, even if there's a piece in front of it. So all these pieces on this board can do fascinating things, but it's very easy to neglect the pawn. And the pawn is what I want to zoom on today. It's what I want to put my focus on today, because if you look at the game closely, the pawn is probably the most fascinating piece among those 16 pieces. And here's why. So without even complicating this, simply put, the pawn on the chessboard is the only piece that has the potential to become anything it wants to be. Let me say that again. The pawn on the chessboard is the only piece that has the potential to become anything it wants to be. If you noticed how each piece moves on the board, the pawn is the only piece that does not retreat. The pawn only understands forward movement, a square at a time, but always forward. It never goes back. Even when it captures a different piece, it doesn't capture backwards. So even when it gains something, it doesn't gain backwards. It always moves forward. The only thing the pawn understands is forward progression towards one goal, to get to the end of the board. And when it gets to the end of the board, it has the potential to become any other piece on the board that it chooses. It's the only piece that can do this. So how does this relate to you? It's very simple in life to feel like you are the pawn, like you're the underdog, like you are the person that's moving one step at a time. When there's the rooks and the bishops and the knights moving forward, backwards, there's all these other pieces moving forward at rapid rates. It's very easy to see yourself as the pawn, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Embrace the pace at which you're moving. Like the pawn, move forward all the time. Don't go backwards. The queen on your right can go forward, but can also go backwards. It can move 8 steps to the end of the board. It can move 8 squares to the end of the board, but can also move backwards. You, the pawn, can only move forward. It's the only thing you understand. That's how you're built. You're built only to move forward. The only thing you understand is progress. Okay? So in as much as all these other people in life can seem to be moving forward at a very rapid rate, consider this. Not all movement is progress. I'll say that again. Not all movement is progress. Just because something is moving doesn't necessarily mean that they're progressing. Just because there's motion doesn't mean there's progression. So embrace the pawn that you are, because you're powerful, because you have the potential to become anything you want to be. The pawn on the board has the potential to become anything it wants to be. The queen, powerful as it is, can only be a queen. The rook, powerful as it is, can only be a rook. Even the king himself on the board can only be a king and nothing more. But the pawn has the potential to be absolutely any other piece it desires on the board. I want you to think about that for a second. So when you're feeling like you're a pawn in life, when you're feeling like you're not progressing as quickly as you should, when you're feeling like you're moving a square at a time, consider this. Are you making progress? Are you hardwired to just move forward, even if it's a square at a time? Is your ambition to get to the 8th square and become whatever you can be? Consider that before you look at the queen on your side moving 10 steps forward, because that queen is not wired to only move forward. It can also go 8 steps back. You are hardwired. You are designed to only understand progression. The only thing on your mind as the pawn is getting to the 8th square and becoming whatever you want to be. That's your primary objective, and you're focused. All the pieces moving left and right from you can go back, can go left. You are only focused on moving forward. Not all movement is progress. Just because the queen can move forward doesn't mean it's progressing, because it can also move backward. The pawn can only move forward. It only understands progression. It only understands forward movement. One square at a time, slow as it may be, but it only understands progression. Embrace being a pawn. Don't worry about the rooks and queens and bishops moving around you. Let them move. Let them roam those 64 squares. Your only objective is a square at a time. Your only objective is forward progression. Your only objective is to get to the 8th square, where you can demand from this life. I have come from the very beginning, and now I'm here. I'm demanding from this life to be whatever I want to be. So embrace being a pawn. Embrace being looked at as the smallest, slowest piece on the board. Embrace it. But understand that in as much as you're the smallest, slowest piece on the board, you're also the only piece that understands that you only have to move forward. You're also the only piece that can become any other piece on those 64 squares. Every other piece can only be the piece that it is. The pawn is the only piece that has the potential to become any other piece on the board. Embrace being a pawn, all right? Awesome. That's it from me. Y'all have a great week. And as always, dare to be great. See what happens. Peace.